All right. Beautiful. So welcome, Marco. Adda is here today to support us in understanding how to regulate our nervous systems with our dogs, or that kind of term you might hear out there, co-regulation. What does that mean? And Marco, I first encountered his work. He does some fascinating research around how our dogs can help us heal. So he's an anthrozoologist, dog well-being and behavior consultant, but also has a background in somatic therapy as well. So welcome, Marco, and I'll pass it over to you to share what you feel is relevant and supportive in your journey, which would support people in understanding where you come from.
Thank you so much, Miranda, for having me. And hi everybody, and you are more than welcome, everybody, to be on video. I'm happy to have this conversation as a family reunion. We can, as much as possible, we can also interact, or there will be time for a few questions later for sure. And very happy to be here to discuss, to share more. And what you mentioned as an introduction already puts together a few points that I believe are core. So the interconnection of what we may consider animal behavior, dog behavior, ethology, and animal cognition or human cognition with somatic practices, and that also touches on a little bit on human, for sure, a lot on human psychology and other disciplines, right? So I believe this is core to put together, for sure. That mirrors my research, mirrors my inclination, but I believe that is important to put together disciplines and connecting dots, and because that may provide some insightful knowledge or intuition that may help in our lives personally, as a community, and also as a human-animal community, in the interaction with our dogs, with our cats, with the neighbor dogs or cats or cow or chicken, whoever may be the neighbor. As you probably know, or anyway, I've been working a lot with free-ranging dogs. So I've been living and studying free-ranging dogs in many places where not just free-ranging dogs are around and live free, but also chickens live free, cows live free, or at least with a certain degree of freedom, let's say, of agency. When you apply just one discipline, a bunch of lenses to understand a certain context, sometimes it may be insightful, but may not be sufficient. So interdisciplinarity, it's core, I believe, and I'm willing to talk more on this, especially from the lens of looking at this specific point that you mentioned, that is co-regulation.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I feel like I read an article a long time ago, and this is like that certain people are really focused on one discipline and just like go all in one space. And this was this argument, or this kind of different perspective, that actually that's a strength, which I'd always seen it as a weakness in myself, because I'm like this, I love to dabble in all these different areas, to do that, to grab from a lot of, because you have these layers of different perspective that not a lot of people would be able to grasp. So I really appreciate that about you and your work and your perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
So just starting there in the beginning, like if we could just maybe start by defining co-regulation, just for people who are curious or hear the word a lot and are unsure, what does it mean?
Well, let's take the easy path. Given a situation where, for some reason, our emotional state, our mental state, our bodily behavior, body-mind behavior gets a little bit unbalanced in the presence of other individuals. It may be one other individual, more than one other individual. It may be a human individual. It may be one or more human individuals. It may be an other than human animal individuals or individual. Yeah. When this situation goes out of balance a little bit on some level, we are somehow able to recenter ourselves and attune this process of recentering with others we have around us and mutually influence each other in this process of regulating and everything and go back to a center, let's say, where things are under check, where things are somehow controlled or anyway reasonably controlled and sustainable, to later recuperate a space for communication and conversation, whereas this space sometimes when things are out of balance get lost, right? Goes lost, right? We lose that space, right? So in other words, in even shorter form, is a way to rebalance and regulate ourselves and others within a certain situation, given a certain situation, right? Where things are a little bit out of balance, right? And this is, I would say, the easiest way to put it. Of course, this is a core concept and practice in the field of education, in the field of a child-adult education. Interaction is something crucial in the parent-child interaction, is something crucial in school with the teacher, children, student, teacher, children/students interaction, and it's something core also in the interaction that we may have with our family members, for sure, because in families there is no shortage of moments where things go out of balance and we need to make a good use of co-regulation with the mom that is saying something and I'm disappointed with that. But then, and what we observe is sometimes when one member of a group or of a duo or between two individuals or a group is not, let's say, has some hard time in co-regulating, in participating, because it's a participatory event, right? When an individual has a hard time in participating in that event, there may be an escalation, right? Because let's put it practically. Let's say we have a family member, a brother or sister that does that thing every time that every time I say that, she does that, and she starts yelling at me, and she's not able to control herself, right? And when she does that, I lose my temper, and I start doing this, and because I'm doing that thing, she's keeping. So the process just escalates because somebody within that system is unable to rebalance and regulate and self-regulate, which is actually core in co-regulation. A certain degree of self-regulation is core, of course. And that also happens when we, for example, interact with dogs. Let's say is the case of a dog that is barking, right? And is barking for a reason that sometimes we don't understand, and we start yelling at the dog. And because the dog's keeping barking for a reason that we do not understand, we keep yelling at the dog and keep missing the reasons, understanding the underlying reasons, but we get triggered, our nervous system gets triggered by that behavior and we react to that behavior. So by reacting to that behavior, we keep triggering the behavior of the dog, and we get trapped in a loop that just escalates, and the dog is not able to self-regulate herself or himself. I'm not able to self-regulate myself, and so that process goes on, and it doesn't bring any good to any of us within that interaction, right? So yeah, I would stop there, but for sure we may go back to the concept of self-regulation, which may be also important to discuss a little bit for dog parents, people interacting with dogs, dog trainers. That's certainly one interesting aspect to discuss further.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think that, you know, there's an interconnectedness there. And what I experience, and it's my own journey, is needing to learn those regulation skills in order to support my son and my animals. And I recognize like that never was taught those. So I think, yeah, it's super, super important to mention. So where do you kind of begin with the regulation piece? So you mentioned, we'll keep it on, you know, this topic of dogs is, you know, our dogs trigger us. We kind of get into that.
Yeah.
Where do you begin kind of in developing regulation skills? Because so that we can support our dogs in calming down. You know, they don't respond to just being told to calm down. No one does. But where do we begin in kind of creating that for ourselves?
Yeah, I can, you know, tell a few stories. I've been working for many years. I still do as a dog behavior consultant and dog trainer. And when I was entering the house of people contacting me because their dog had an issue, maybe destructive behavior, destroying things around, or compulsive barking, or separation anxiety, or any other similar behavior, aggressiveness, and so on, you name it. I would say that 90% of the cases, of those cases, has been solved through self-regulation of dog parents. When dog parents were learning to self-regulate themselves, most of those issues were solved. In many cases, even without understanding the underlying root of the problem. But naturally, things were falling in the right place just by helping people in learning how to self-regulate themselves. Not just learning, first and foremost, to show them that by self-regulating themselves, they can tremendously impact the situation and the behavior of their dogs. Right? And in fact, in many cases, let's say, in the typical situation when somebody contacts me, I make a few preliminary questions by phone or by mail, filling the form and so on. And I try to get the picture of the situation, right? So when I get to the house of people, in those cases where I go live, that happened for many years in East Asia, where I've been based for a while, and somewhere in Mexico, in California, briefly where I've been living, in other places around the world, or sometimes just online because I offer online consultation on those aspects. And one way or the other, when I enter the house of somebody's place in person or digitally online, I have already an idea of what the situation. And when I enter, I typically ask to not engage the dogs and to have a conversation, a calm conversation with the people. We start talking, and while we are having the conversation, I offer some cues, some suggestions. I give some suggestions about taking some breaths, talking to adjust their tone of voice when they are telling me with a certain degree, for example, of agitation, because I was doing this and the dog happened this and that and that. Okay, take a breath. Please try to explain me again what happened, but take few minutes instead than 30 seconds, right? And so by giving those practical suggestions and tips, people start feeling differently, start to frame differently what happened, start to listen at themselves. And then in many cases, for example, let's say in those cases when they were claiming or saying that nobody can enter their place, there were many cases. For example, those people are concerned. People were concerned that dogs would have barked all the time if I go to their place, right?
Mhm.
And from the first moment I entered the place, dogs were calmly under their chair, under the sofa. And so they were also surprised. And this is not to brag myself, believe me, it's just because bringing a certain type of energy and showing them that a certain type of energy can trigger that degree of self-regulation that consequently regulates the behavior of a dog, regulate the mood of a dog, and then trigger a co-regulation within that system, right? So there are a lot of practical tips that we can give along those lines, but I believe that at least one of the most powerful information and understanding that people can get on self-regulation and co-regulation is that the power that they have in their own behavior, in their own ability to regulate themselves and breathe and stay calm, and how that can impact tremendously everything around them, with dogs and with people also. Many people, many clients. I am in contact with all of my clients after 1 year, 6 months. Somebody still sending the postcard of a dog I've been helping 10 years ago, who is now old and is doing well, and many of them keep saying, hey Marco, I'm not sure how to frame this, but after we've done this dog training thing, my life is changed. I am way better with people, not with dogs. I say, yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. Actually, there is no real difference in that regard. When we work on ourselves and we adjust ourselves and we understand the power we have in influencing the environment, being the environment, everything out of us, dogs, people, and everything else, of influencing the environment by bringing some shifts within ourselves and adjusting our breathing, our feeling, our imagination, our mood. Of course, this is going to impact your life, your whole life, right? So self-regulation is key to co-regulation, is key to change and adjust and support the behavior of other animals and other people around us, and ultimately is going to change our life to some extent at least, right? So I believe those are core points in this discussion, and for some may be obvious, for some maybe not obvious, but it's I believe is worth to touch on those points, because that's been my experience, and I see how this works with both people and human and non-human animals. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate how you just walk people through that. Like what I experienced when you shared that is in the initial conversation, helping people co-regulate with you just by asking them to slow down, asking them, okay, take a breath, and then kind of retell the story and then they were able to kind of unravel. But it's amazing how you described that so many things were rectified just in the person developing more their own self-regulation skills. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other side of the spectrum, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the other side of the spectrum is to help people in trusting that when that dogs have that power too, right? Talking about dogs or any other animal, right? Any other non-human animal, other than human animal. Dogs have that power too. So on the one hand, we can take that responsibility, calm ourselves, and as a way to impact what we have around us, including everybody maybe around us. But we can trust that a dog can have that power too. And we can have that trust if we are open to provide any other being around us with agency. This is another core concept, I would say. Sometimes we may be, especially when we are nervous or when we lose our temper, composure, or our center somehow, or we are just in a stressful period of our life, we may lose also a little bit that trust that somebody around us can be a point of reference. Although we crave for that somewhere within ourselves, because we know we are in need of help, and that may be in a period of our life, or in a bad, or just in a rainy day, let's say, right? In a small moment and in a larger moment, let's say in a larger period, right? So we crave for help, we crave for support, but because our level of anxiety or stress is higher, a level of agitation is higher, a level of adrenaline or cortisol in general are a bit higher in that period or in that day, that triggers some mechanisms for some reason in our brain, in our system, that reduce our trust in others. And because we have less trust in others, we may trust less for somebody to be able to provide some support, or for a dog to be able to provide some support. Well, in fact, a dog, if we are trustful and we provide a dog with agency meaning, you, dog, I believe that you have the power to support me. I believe that you have the power to make some good decision, right choices, good decision that ultimately can help me, right? So we need to make a shift from whatever we may think, okay, a dog is just a dog, or maybe I love him, but how a dog can help me, or yes, it can help me, but not today. There may be a number of processes that are going on, right? But a number of ways we may frame it according to the culture we come from, according to the mood we have, according to many aspects, right? But if we remember that the dog dog can help us, and we provide the dog with agency, then it's also true that way around, right? A dog can by being self-regulated, can help us to co-regulate. So let's say, put in other words, as we've said, sometimes we go in a loop because somebody is not able to stop certain behavior, and so that triggers a loop, right? So sometimes a dog is stronger than us, and so we can rely on that on that center that the dog represents to self-regulate ourselves and interrupt that loop, and then grab again that the good direction, the good terrain, the good mood to co-regulate each other within that relationship, right? So those are two main points where on the one end, we are able to self-regulate and change everything. On the other hand, when we need some support, we can rely on our humans, if it's the case of humans, or any other than humans, so a dog, for example, to help us regulate. And this links well with the theme of emotional support. Animals, for example, that are those animals that not necessarily therapy animals specifically trained for certain things. I'm not talking about this. Emotional support animals are animals that are inclined to bring that type of support and are part in some cases. So they can be absolutely any animal living with us at home or that are around us, that somehow, for some reason, because of the relationship they have around them, those animals, they happen to become emotional support individuals within that relation. Is the case, for example, of a dog that is quite balanced, living with somebody that is often emotional, and a human that is often emotional, a human that is often reactive to things, right? And that dog may be playing that role of being an emotional support animal, right? And I've been doing experiments on that, and I'm studying that specific aspect in one of my projects that is called canine participated somatic experiencing, and I published a paper on that, and I'm happy for your listeners to go and download that paper for free, where basically in a somatic context where we do work with bodily work and practices and exercise and expression, emotional expression, there is the presence of a dog. There are specific elements that need to be respected within that frame, and it happens that the dog interacts with the people in certain specific way in specific moments and bring some support to people within that context. So those elements are certainly part of the picture and are certainly important to me, and I believe yeah, it may be interesting for others too.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that the piece that kind of jumped out to me was around the, stress, or when we're experiencing stress or a period of challenge or dysregulation, that we lose trust, right? That there is, our brains, I guess, are so flooded with stress chemicals that we lose that connection. And just that remembrance that dogs that can sometimes bridge that gap of maybe we don't trust enough to seek human connection, but we do have that animal connection. Yeah. I'm curious though, when you mentioned, like, because what I find is some dogs fit that role of emotional support dogs, where they come and they can support us with challenges, and then there's other dogs that seem to pick up almost on our stressor and become a lot more anxious, and then you kind of have this loop of anxious dog, anxious guardian. So what do you observe there? Like, is there a certain profile of a dog that kind of seems to really be balanced? Because I know in your work you choose kind of those dogs that are balanced. But is there a kind of a profile of that? So what I tend to see is the other side as well, where person is anxious or worried or stressed, and the dog picks up on that, and it becomes a feedback loop of dysregulation.
There was a little bit of interruption, but I guess I got your question. Okay. let me make sure that what type of profile of dog can be relevant for this type of
Yeah. Yeah, I was
yeah,
just curious with that. Yeah.
yeah. So of course, if you enter, when I enter the house of people, they have their dogs, and so there may be already some characteristics that are playing a role within that context, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, your question is tricky in a good sense.
Mm-hmm.
In a good sense. Why? Because let's say when you enter the house of somebody, there is a profile for that dog that has been established through time
Mm-hmm.
that describes certain characteristics of the behavior of that dog or those dogs that are given from the relationships and the patterns that have been established within that system, within that family system, which doesn't mean that the profile of those or that dog is limited to what behavior that dog is showing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So basically, the profile of that dog is covering a certain spectrum of behaviors that is just a slice of the possible behavior and characteristics that dog can show and display. And in fact, when we change the dynamics within that family,
Mm-hmm.
the spectrum of behaviors of that dog also change.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The the characteristics that emerge are those we need ideally for that. If we were to design an ideal profile of a dog that we need to bring emotional support and listening and agency and co-regulation, we would define certain characteristics, let's say that are prevalent compared to others, right? And so while we are addressing a few things within that family system, and we are bringing some tools and rebalancing certain moods and behaviors, and so what emerge in the behavior of that dog are those characteristics that are ideal, let's say, to support a certain type of process, certain type of co-regulation, right? So let's say in general, a dog that is calmer, a dog who is more empathetic of what the others are doing, a dog that is more autonomous, that relies in a right amount on the support of people around him or her, but is also able to choose for herself, for himself, right? And so on, right? So for sure that the more a dog and a person are centered, the better it is for the whole family and for the whole system, right? Given that, say that, I've done, for example, some episodes or experiments, I would say, some on the beaches of Bali, Indonesia, where I was studying free-ranging dogs, and I got quite close to a specific group of free-ranging dogs on a specific area of Bali, Indonesia, on a specific beach of Bali, Indonesia, and basically living with them for various months. So I knew them very well, and they knew me very well, right? And at the same time, as a somatic practitioner and coach for some people who were asking for some help, some clients who were asking for some help. So people approaching me not because of dog-related needs or issues, but for personal transformations, for personal processes, right? And so, but because of the multidisciplinarity that we were speaking of at the beginning of our conversation, part of the program that I was doing with those people was to inviting them to spend some time with my dog family, say, on the beaches of Bali, right? And make a process of staying there and just spend time with the dogs and see what the dogs can bring to them, right? And because those dogs were very good at self-regulating, because French dogs are very good at self-regulating because they have less human influence on them. We should talk a moment about that later if we have time. But because they are very good at self-regulating, they were also very essential in what they were doing with those people. With those people were coming on the beach, they were sitting there, dogs, they were taking the time to address, to understand who those people were, to understand their mood, to feel their mood, to feel their scent, of course, and to keep the distance when it was the case, to keep the distance, to interact when it was the case, to interact, and to really support those people when it was the case, support those people. Like, for example, people were on the beach sitting, dogs were going close to them, sniffing at them, and then going away, sitting away, and then another dog. And imagine that in a group of 5 dogs, they have different roles within that group of dogs, right? There is somebody who is more decision-making, there is somebody who is more emotional, there is somebody who is more warning, the one who gives warning for some in case of concerns. There is the one who goes around, always is never in with the group, it goes far and then comes back. So he's the explorer, let's say. They have different roles within that group, right? But let's say there were moments where those people were on the beach who were talking. Anyway, we were having a consultation with dogs around, right? So sitting there, basically we were having a dog participated coaching consultation on the beach, right? And when it was time, the right time, that those people were opening and start maybe expressing some frustration, or maybe crying, or maybe expressing other emotions, 1 or 2 dogs, that was the moment. Without calling them, they were coming, even if they were not sitting in our proximity, maybe they were 10, 20 feet away, they were coming gently next to the person and sitting next to him or her, or licking a food. And you can see that was triggering and supporting the process of the person, which ultimately was thankful to the dog and recognizing that the presence of dogs have helped him or her, right? And so again, those dogs were foraging dogs. They were not trained at all, but they were just empathically participating to that type of situation. They trusted me, I trusted them. The person who was coming to that situation was trusting me, and things were happening. And that's why later I tried to explore a few aspects of this process, and working on how to formalize some elements with this research, which I linked in the chat if you want, and people can have a look at it. So back on track. what type of elements we can identify, what's ideal. Universally speaking, there is not really something that can be considered really ideal. Universally speaking, every element can be ideal given a certain situation, given a certain context, and according to the people and the dogs who are participating. Sometimes a very energized dog can be very supporting in help a person in self-regulating and triggering a process of co-regulation. And sometimes it's the other way around, right? A very calm dog or a very calm person can help to a dog in triggering a co-regulation process, right? In firing, in helping the mirror neurons firing, right? We should talk a little bit about mirror neurons, but this ability to reflect each other, to mirror into each other and regulate each other, right? Let's say it's shorter, right? But okay, I stopped it there because, as you may imagine, I can speak for days about those
things. No, and I have many
questions
as well, but I do want to open it up to anyone who's here live who does have questions for you, so we can respect your time and their time. But yes, that piece that I found fascinating is that if given that any dog can have that role, if just given, you know, like the space and the agency, they all have that innate ability to support us. Yeah. So we can definitely open it if there is any questions, if anyone's here live who wants to pick Marco's brain on their own dog or just regulation, any topic that jumped out at you. You can type it in the chat or unmute yourself. Doesn't matter. Either one works.
I'm happy to hear from Christina and Cornelia. Whatever question or observation you may have, and thank you for being here. Ciao, Cristina.
Hello, ciao. Come stai?
Hello. Bene, grazie. Thank you for speaking a bit of Italian. Nice.
I've been a dog parent for the past 19 years. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. I worked a lot on myself, a lot on the dogs, but the past 2 years, I've had to say goodbye to the first, let's say, dogs. And the past 2 years, I've had to say hello to 2-year-old, 3-year-old now dogs. And I find it very difficult to, because the other ones were like 16, 17 years old. So I was past the puppyhood and everything. And now I'm back to puppyhood and they don't listen. And I get aggravated and they say, I live in a big land. So I say, come, and they're like, I'm going to hunt now, you know. I'm not going to listen to you, woman. I'm going to hunt now because my instinct says. So as I was hearing, I was thinking, yeah, you know, I understand all of this, but what to do when the instinct is there? Should I just hold them with the leash the whole time so they can hear me? You know, but who do I talk to when their instinct is there and they're hunting the whole time?
Yeah, you know, sometimes I mean, most of the times, basically, is a negotiation. What the answer is a negotiation with our intuition, with our instinct, with our drive, with our response to things, right? I make you a quick example. You know, many times, you know, for example, when I was helping people with some dogs that who do not respond to the recalling, right? So they say, Marco, if I unleash the dog, it just gets crazy. He will never come back. He will never come back. So and then I remember I had a session, very fun one, with a man in California a few years ago, 2018. I was living there for a short while, as I say, and I go to this large park somewhere in the Bay, in the Bay north of San Francisco, and then the man was very concerned and very scared, right? And then And okay, we framed the situation. I gather all of those information. I see the dog, I see the man. And we get to the park. We walked a little bit on the leash. She was very agitated, right? And then I said, okay, now you breathe and you unleash her. She was a tiny, very energetic dog. You unleash her, and then you look at me. You look at me. You stay with the eyes on me. He was panicking a little bit because of that, because he had a fear to lose her forever. That she got lost, she got killed by another dog, she go in the ocean, she goes whatever, and so it was hard for him, but he did it, and then he stayed on me, and I said, look at me, and the dog was getting crazy and far away, right? And then I said, and now keep looking at me and then turn this way. And I made him turn the opposite direction of where the dog was going. And he was paralyzed, you know. I knew that sometimes too much, but so I didn't have time to tell you all the background of the conversation I had with this man, but that was the choice I made, and as the best thing to do in that, at least to try in that moment. Right? And it was freezing, and I said, and now we walk in this opposite direction. And why I'm telling you this story? Because in that moment, when we walked in the opposite direction, I asked him just to break the ice and help him to say something, to speak a little bit. And I said, to express himself. I said, how do you feel? And he goes, it feels counterintuitive to me. Yeah. It feels counterintuitive. In the moment he says that, and we were walking, the dog came next to him from far away and started walking next to him. And he starts crying. And I'm still getting emotional thinking about it. And he was keep repeating, it's counterintuitive, it's counterintuitive. And he was crying, and the dog was next to him. And for the whole walk we had around this park, with this dog who was never left out of the leash, the dog was just staying a few feet away and then come back to him. And sometimes he had the intuition, let's say, to call the dog. I say, stop, wait, breathe, look at me, let's change direction, and let's see what the dog does. And so the dog was coming again and again and again. And so basically we were moving, the three of us, as dog move when they are free ranging, or as wolves move in the wild, or as group animals move. They know where the others are. They keep an eye where the others are. And that's another level of intuition too. That's also so it also means what value are we giving to intuition? What meaning are we giving to intuition? From which perspective we are considering something to be intuitive or not, right? So sometimes it's a matter of changing lenses and understanding that maybe there is a different angles from which we can look at the situation, right? And long story short, that relationship with that dog, of that man, he was waiting, he was crying, he was fully in a bath of water with tears and everything. But from that moment on, the dog, he's going to the park or every other place with dog possibly off leash, and the dog is following him, right? So back to your question, which I deeply felt and appreciate, and sorry for the digression, but it's important to breathe into the situation, allow ourselves time to listen, to listen means for new angles, for new perspective to unfold, to raise, or maybe just to allow ourselves the time to understand some new elements that are already in front of us, but we are maybe still resisting to it for some reason, right? And in this type of picture, healing is important, right? Allow the time to ourselves to heal, because sometimes when we are in a process of healing and processing things, and the level of, again, some hormones may be a bit higher than other, we may be a bit closer to certain signals, and because we are in a process, right? So the process of healing and self-compassion are core in this situation, those situations. The animals and people we may have around may play an important role. We may be trustful toward them and accept that, as we said before, they may have the agency to support us over our own understanding of what that may mean.
Mhm.
I hope this answers somehow.
It does. It does. And I've seen it happening, but other times I am not able, you know, so that's why I have the opposite result of what I want. So yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes opposite results is a sort of disadvantage, right? We can frame it this way. However, sometimes the best things we achieve them just because we are starting from a position of disadvantage. So what I can suggest is trust also the moment of disadvantage. They may be happening to support you too.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Background is I have a 3-year-old Labrador Retriever who is reactive to other dogs. So going on a walk is really a rough thing. We do more avoidance than anything. So on co-regulation, we're working on that in the house. And so he'll look out the window and he'll see a dog coming and he goes totally off. Sometimes, other times he can handle it better. But my question is, because he is emotional in that moment when he sees another dog, do you have any tips or techniques to bring him back down into his body where he can shift gears into co-regulation? Yeah, so we're beginning, and I'd love any help, any ideas.
Thank you, Cornelia. Wonderful question. What do you do when the dog does that behavior?
Oh, well, I start talking to him and I move over away from the window and sit on a little stool. Then once he can refocus on me, he brings me his blanket and all that, and then we kind of start. But I just wondered if there was some way to translate that out into the real world. Anyway, I'm very much in interior working with him because I can't do anything out in the yard. And then he's on a leash and all that. So it's just bringing him back into his body rather than into his head, where he's just he goes berserk and barking.
Yeah. So a few considerations here. First, we are talking of a high energy dog. Typically, I mean, that's not always the case, but a very excitable dog that may respond to stimuli more than others, but that would need to be assessed with the specific characteristic of your dog. So I take it with a grain of salt, right, as a general consideration, which may be totally false. And secondly, As we all know, there is no one equation, one specific equation that may support a specific problem, a specific manifestation, a specific behavior. It depends a lot on what happens in that moment when your dog meet or see other dogs and reacts, and what do you do, and what the interaction of your behavior and her or his behavior what unfolds from that interaction, right? So given those premises, in some cases, let's say in similar situations of dogs being very reactive to other dogs or to any elements that may have triggered their response. In similar situations, what has often worked is trying to take yourself away from the situation. It's not always the case. It doesn't always work, and it's not always the right decision or the right approach, right? But in some cases, so as you mentioned, that you go there, you maybe try to bring the dog away from the window, or maybe talk to the dog, right? We would need to understand to which extent, let's put it this way, whatever behavior you are having is being perceived by your dog as a confirmation that what the dog is doing may be interesting to you, right? So we would need to assess that first, right? So because I don't know the situation, I haven't seen a video, I haven't seen the situation. So this is the first question I will make. Let's say you would be a client, and this is one of the first things I would need to assess, right? But let's make the case that what you're doing is contributing for the dog. Let's make it as an example, right? Let's say that with all of the best intention you have, what you're doing is maybe contributing for the dog to believe that what the dog is doing, what he or she is doing, is somehow interesting to you, and therefore the next time he will also do it because he believes, not just because he is reactive or she is reactive. Is a she or he?
Oh, it's a he.
Okay, so not just because he is reactive for his temperament, but also because to some extent he believes you are interested in seeing that response, right? Which is very common in the behavior of a dog, in the interaction of dogs and humans, right? So it's not a bad dog, it's not a bad person. This is just part of the interaction and the patterns that sometimes unfold in the interaction of dogs and people, right? So we would need to see what may be taken away from that picture so that the dog may not be further.
So just a little more, I'm trying to soothe him. I see that he's frightened and he's barking, and I don't want to tell him not to bark, and get mad at him. So I'm going, something's scary out there, and, you're such a big boy, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my reaction, is to try to empathy with him.
Yes. And but again, I want to be very, cautious with that, right? Because I appreciate all your best intention, and I am sure you are careful dog mom, caring dog mom, and you do it at your best. But sometimes what we do with our best intention may be part of the system of a certain behavior, right? So we need to be aware of that and see, for example, if a dog, I'm not sure to which extent that may be your case, but let's say I have a dog at the leash and the dog barks to another dog, and then I try to reassure my dog You say, no, it's okay, don't bark it. Right? For some dogs, may be the best way to go. For other dogs, it's not. Because for other dogs, due to certain circumstances, those dogs may understand that you are prizing them with your intervention, right? May be confused in what your intentions are. Just because your intervention may come in a specific moment that for the dog means certain things instead than others, right? So we may need to readjust maybe the way you interact with the dog or you do your intervention. We may need to postpone it, or we may need to move it to another moment of the day, another moment of that situation, another moment of the picture, right? A delay may be needed in that picture, or maybe another modality of your behavior. So in some cases, subtraction, so taking something away from the picture, taking ourselves away from the picture, sometimes may be a good test, at least, to see what happens if we do not display a certain behavior within a certain situation, right? And see what the dog does, right? And again, it's not an absolutely valid equation. Is given the very few elements that you are providing, I'm just throwing this out there as a way to reflect upon, and of course, if the situation requires the intervention of an expert, and more than I'm sure that Miranda can maybe support you with that.
Do you have any thoughts on vocabulary, the words we use with our dogs that they understand, or try to put meaning into it? Have you worked with language, or does that make any sense?
I'm not sure I get the question. I'm not sure I got the question. Can you say again?
Yeah. So because he loses his mind, I'm trying to bring him back to me with words more than just his name, like, that he's reacting. I just wondered if that is something that you entertain.
Okay, you can use so the core here is how to trigger core regulation, right? For example,
how to respond.
How to respond, or how to not respond. How to trigger for regulation. And then it turns out maybe it's handy and helpful that in that moment, for example, when the dog comes to you, you say absolutely nothing and just sitting calmly and breathing. Or maybe for example, a client who had a similar scenario, was struggling for a similar scenario, I gave her the task. I asked her to cut the ingredients of a biscuit a box of biscuits, and there were the ingredients wheat and sugar and this and that inside, right? Yeah. And then I said, when this happens, you come to the table, you wait for the dog to come back to you with a similar situation, and you read with a calm voice, one by one, with a breath between each ingredient, all the ingredients of of those biscuits, right? As an exercise, as a task, right? And that was very grounded for that type of person. I could have given other types of input, but for that person, that was very practical. For that mentality, for that particular person, that was very practical. I cut this, I have this happened, I come here, I read this.
There he goes.
With this pace and with the breath between those elements, right? And sure enough, the dog every time was coming to the table and she was taking these things. The dog was calming.
Okay.
listening at her, reading the thing, lying down and falling asleep. At the point that she used that thing also in the evening when it was time to go to sleep. When it was time for everybody in the house to go to sleep, right? Because she found it pleasurable for her, and the dog was responding very well. So she took it as a lullaby. Apart from being as something that can be used when the dog was triggered and getting agitated, she was using it as a lullaby in the night. So she was calling to the dog, either to the table or in the sofa, the dog bed, and she was reading that way. So, in other words, is whatever you say is how you say it and what's behind that and the intention you're bringing. That's what the dog is going to read and perceive and register, record and embody in his body mind or her body mind. And that's what trigger mirroring and co-regulation.
Great. Thank you very much. That was so novel. I will try it.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. That piece, I think that was really interesting, that piece of, yeah, it's not what you say, it's like how you say it and your intention behind it. And picked up from that too, like he's just finding those things that bring us back to our center. And yeah, just doing a little check-in. It came into myself as well. Like when my intention, and this is coming to me from just an interaction with my son earlier, when my intention is, you know, you're not okay, I need to make you okay, that's not a grounded intention, right? So kind of finding those ways to come back to ourselves so that then we can support them from that much more centered space. Yeah, thank you. There's always things that open up from conversations with others. So appreciate you sharing that, Cornelia, your story, and Christina as well. Yeah, so if people are interested in learning more about your work or, you know, what you do in the world, can you just share where they can find you, reach you?
Absolutely. You can check my general website where you will find all of my projects is just marcoadda.com. So you will find both my projects in the human-animal interaction area and in my somatic and bodily area. And of course, if you are curious about the academy too, you may want to check all the programs. Yeah, I'm happy also to invite whoever may be interested with a bit of support, those who are part of your community. If you want, Miranda, we can offer a little bit of support and discount for if somebody is out, happy to take some programs there. Maybe I post just easily the link here.
Sure, yeah.
And my email also is marcogerardoadda.com if you have some consideration. Sorry, marcogerardoadda@gmail.com. And if you have some consideration, I'm happy to hear that. Some question. You just write me, you know, if you have also some reflections on what we have been saying, if you're going to listen this conversation at some point later, you may come up with some question or consideration, some doubts. Please just reach out. I'm happy to engage in conversation, any conversation at any point. Yeah, and I put everything in the chat. Hopefully that's helpful. And really, thank you again, Miranda, for this opportunity to share more. I really appreciate your work too, I have to say. I feel we are in tune in many ways. And please keep up with that. And thank you also, Christina and Cornelia, for being here, for the questions, and to whoever else may be curious and listening to our conversation today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marco. I really appreciate it. And I'll stop recording now. And anyone who's here live, you're welcome to drop off whenever you choose.